for our global business update. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, good morning. And if I just may turn the tables very slightly on you this morning. After I finish this, I'd love to share your thoughts about Mikhail Gorbachev, who, as you know, died yesterday. But we'll come to that right at the end of the report, 'cause I think it's pretty important. I'd love to hear what you think about it. You've been talking about how nations should get together, and I think this is one person who probably did an enormous amount. But anyway, for the moment, Chinese markets dropping really, factory activity shrinking very, very slightly. The markets are fairly mixed this morning, given the kind of negative lead that we had from Wall Street last night. The Shanghai Composite down about 1%. I'm talking about the official Purchasing Managers Index for August. It beat expectations very, very slightly. But major cities in China, including Dalian and Shenzhen, have been tightening their COVID restrictions. So it's a fairly mixed picture. Hong Kong paired earlier losses. However, EV maker BYD fell more than 12%, dragging down the Hang Seng Index. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway trimmed its stake to just over 19%. Trimmed its stake to just about 19% in the company, and that was enough to stick the shares down very, very slightly. That said, about China, global miners are pretty convinced that stimulus from the government in China will help prop up steel and iron demand. There are no signs that steel and iron ore demand have crumbled, but that's only because there are relatively low levels of inventory at Chinese ports. So there is a feeling that no matter what, the government will step in, and the miners are relatively happy about this. The UN is saying, it's for its part, that the global food crisis is not about availability, it's about affordability. I don't know what you think about this. Obviously, the war in Ukraine, as they put it, put a lot of fuel on an already burning fire, and talking about Ukraine as well. But it says it's there. It's just a question of whether or not it can be afforded or not. The World Bank says that uncertainty, though, could keep prices high beyond 2024. So let us turn to the United States and see stock futures slightly higher. A big fall once again yesterday. Various stocks like Chewy, which is a pet food manufacturer, HP stock dipped too. Futures, though, slightly up. Basically, I mean, what the markets seem to be doing is digesting, on the one hand, what Jerome Powell said at Jackson Hole over the weekend about interest rates probably remaining higher for longer, and whether or not that's good for the economy. Again, it's a very mixed picture. Sometimes equities don't like higher interest rates. Sometimes they do, when they feel as though it's underpinning an economy. Elon Musk, we have to talk about him again, unfortunately, but let's do it. He's using the whistleblower, the head of security there, I told you about last week, in his latest effort to sort of scrap the Twitter deal. Twitter shares now down 1%. I mean, talk about trashing the company. This is Peter Zatko, who said earlier this month that extreme egregious deficiencies in the social media company reporting of its privacy, security, and how many genuine accounts it actually has. Twitter, for its part, said Musk's latest termination effort is invalid and wrongful under the acquisition agreement. Right, let's turn our attention to the European Union. Gazprom is halting all its gas deliveries to France's biggest domestic supplier. It's called Engie, and it's obviously people have been worried about ever since Gazprom's closed for, in inverted commas, maintenance problems over the summer. It always has done that, but they're worried about the pipeline and whether or not it would stop fuel completely. Alongside that, we had some flash German CPI numbers yesterday, hitting its highest inflation for many, many years, and we're going to get the same from Europe today, no doubt. So it puts further pressure on the European Union to do something about interest rates. And what will it be? For its part, as far as Europe's concerned, Ryanair is saying it will grow even faster. This is according to Michael O'Leary, the CEO, ever cheery Michael O'Leary. Will grow faster in recession. That's because a lot of the competitors like British Airways have actually withdrawn. He knows that people will find inflation, cost of living hits them very, 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 very hard, but he thinks that people will still fly and cheaper flights will get them on aeroplanes. The UK leadership battle, Rishi Sunak is now saying that Liz Truss's plans are weakening what people feel about the UK economy globally. People are taking wages against debt. It's sending short-term borrowing costs very much higher. Meanwhile, Tory, and he's also claiming that he's not out of the race yet because a lot of Tory activists, according to him, will vote very, very late in this. They probably better get a move on, quite honestly. Boris Johnson, before he goes, he's probably going to give approval to Sizewell C, which is the 30 billion new nuclear power station, and also coming to agreement with Centrica to open the rough gas storage facility under the North Sea. I could be completely wrong about this. What I feel is going on here is something about the government actually saying windfall tax is one thing, future long-term commitments to the economy as quite something else. And I suspect Centrica will probably be drawn over the coals over this. Second wave of UK inflation is going to hit the construction industry. A lot of people actually like HS2 and Crossrail, those kind of projects have been protected because they have been government spending. But if gas prices continue to surge, inflation could exceed 18%, and all those energy costs and building costs will stop house construction. Two final bits. Oil prices are easing a little, but it's clear that Saudi's comments are still echoing around. In other words, next meeting, have a look at the fundamentals. Maybe a production cut there, but it's a balance, isn't it, between what's happening in the world? Is there a world recession? Is production getting a little bit small? And now finally to Mikhail Gorbachev. I would be very interested to get your thoughts about it. As you know, he died yesterday. Many people have credited Mikhail Gorbachev with being the politician that ended the Cold War. You'll remember words like perestroika and glasnost and so on. I think that he probably was a big reforming politician. It was somebody with whom the likes of Reagan and Thatcher said they could both do business with. However, his reforms didn't last, did they?
Well, Gorbachev, Russia's the last leader of the Soviet Union, 1985 to 1991, the only leader of that country to have ever crossed the age of 90. But he will be remembered for, I guess, his modernization efforts. The first leader to attempt that since Peter the Great. And as you said, he introduced glasnost and perestroika. Glasnost, a policy of openness. Perestroika, restructuring. But his legacy is mixed. And I think that, it will probably also be remembered as one of the most controversial figures in, the history of the Soviet Union and subsequently of Russia. Now, he tried to, meet up with the West. He wanted economic growth. He wanted to open up. He introduced a lot of freedoms, freedom of expression. He wanted a mixed economy, which he never quite achieved. But at least he achieved the objective of bringing the Soviet Union closer to the West, for which he was rewarded in 1991 with a Nobel Peace Prize. But for me, all the comments on his legacy, the most striking for me would be the one by Tom Tugendhat, who says that the death of Gorbachev shows the extent to which Russia has fallen. From a dictatorial, if tyrannical, country, now Russia is a playpen of criminals and gangsters. Well, he's referring to the fact, of course, that many die-hard communists don't like Gorbachev. They think he was the man that presided over the fall of the Soviet Union. The rise of nationalism by around the 1990s resulted in an attempted coup, which turned Boris Yeltsin eventually into a hero, and Gorbachev had to resign. Now, Putin thinks that, Gorbachev's legacy is bad, that he destroyed the Soviet Union. But Gorbachev also believes that Putin for want of a better word, is a traitor, and that his invasion of Ukraine is an act of betrayal. But there is no doubt that his intervention may have led eventually to the disintegration of the Soviet Union as we knew it, because of the poverty, the spread of poverty, the protests by the Baltic states, in Azerbaijan and in other places. But of course, that he supported freedoms, he wanted peace, he wanted to redefine East-West relations. He will be remembered for that, most certainly. But as I said, his legacy is missed, and he will remain a controversial figure on both sides, West and East.
I mean, Mikhail Gorbachev is one of those people I put on my list that I'd like to meet in my lifetime, but sadly he's dead. I cannot meet him because he's a true hero in the true sense of it. You know, Brendan Connolly, an Irish poet, said, if you want to serve your age, you have to betray it. And that was what Mikhail Gorbachev did. He looked at the big picture, he looked at the peaceful world, he looked at nuclear disarmament, and he said, let's make peace in this Cold War. And he took that very unpopular view, you know, because when you look at it, the Soviet Union had gone through hardline communists like Artripov and Kerenko. And after Kerenko died, he came in because the Soviets felt, oh, we wanted a younger leader because other leaders died because they were quite elderly. But he tried to stabilize his country, slit down the iron curtain down the middle. Reagan said, I can actually talk to this man. He was a human being. He was a personable person. He was imperfect in many ways, but people could actually talk to him. And when you look at his ideas and ideal, he truly wanted a free market. And for people that say his reforms never worked, they did work. It was just because Russia fell into the hands of albeit a drunkard called Boris Yeltsin, that sold that dream of capitalism to his own cronies like Mikhail Khodorkovsky and the likes of the other people now called the oligarchs. And those people continue to use state power and state wealth to impoverish the Russians. But it's not that Gorbachev didn't open up. At some point, he was a fugitive. The Russians didn't like him. Acceptance value quite low. But he was persistent in what he believed in. He gave liberation to Europe, the satellite states, Ukraine and the likes. All of them could come out today because of Gorbachev. And Gorbachev had a way of talking to leaders that were recalcitrant. In Romania, the likes of Ceausescu and the likes, and he told them that was not going to be the future. You remember the words of Ronald Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And Gobi, as it was fondly called, did tear down that wall and made peace. And reunification of Germany in 1990 happened. Western Germany and Eastern Germany came together for the first time. That was only possible because of a certain Mikhail Gorbachev, Gobi, as it was fondly called. To me, the man is a hero. To the Russian communists, he might be a villain. Anyway, history will never forget Mikhail.
And, you know, it's amazing how just one person alone can change the entire course of history. And we'd probably be looking at a very different world today, if not for him and the way he believed in the power of ideas. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson, for our global business update this morning. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Adiri will be joining us right after this break. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. And I understand we're going north, south, east, west today, Rotus.
That is correct. We are going north, south, east, west. Good morning to you all. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, so we pick in the northern Africa, in Egypt, COP27 is less than 2 months away. And Egypt is eyeing an $8 billion hydrogen facility where the Suez Canal zone is in order to, ramp up exports. And, Leila being our environmental correspondent, I'm sure we'll have something to say about that. So COP27 is happening on the African continent. Lots of focus on renewable energy, lots of focus of the energy transition. And so you're getting a lot of headlines coming out of Egypt that's trying to diversify its energy mix and also focus on exports, because you see what's happening across Europe with the crisis there and the recession fears rising as Russia continues to use different tactics to shorten the amount of gas that Europe gets. So hydrogen is clean. We've a lot of folks talking about moving cars to compressed natural CNG, and it's just better for the environment. So Egypt, that's what they're looking at. I think they've signed an MOU to get started. First installment is about $700 million or so. We go to South Africa, Massmart, which is owned by Walmart. They're going to look at delisting from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Walmart owns, I think, about a 52% share of the company, and they want to buy out the remaining shares. The company has struggled. It's lots of COVID, I think we're flooding, the riots that have happened in South Africa recently. They've all, combined to give Massmart a lot of trouble. Also competition, ShopRite and other players in that retail space in Southern Africa. They have, also part of the issues that Massmart is facing. So Walmart is going to buy them out. I believe the initial stake they bought back in 2010 was worth about $2 billion. I think they'll barely get $200 million worth for this remaining stake. So might be facing a loss there. Although the shares of Massmart did jump about 46% because what they're offering is a premium to what it's trading at on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So that's in the retail sector in Southern Africa. We go to East Africa, Aviation, Kenya Airways, Ugandan Airlines, Air Tanzania. They are all facing losses. I mean, they were facing losses and struggling before. The war in Ukraine drove up energy prices and caused jet A1 fuel to be incredibly expensive. But there's also the issue with, just operational costs and the same issues that Nigerian Airlines are facing here. East African Airlines have also been struggling with I think half year. Kenya Airlines registered another big loss in shillings. So they're still struggling. Here in Nigeria, the NCAA, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, says that domestic airlines are owing them about 19 billion. They had a press briefing yesterday. Director General Captain Nu Musa, he said that essentially they'll be shutting them down in about 30 days if they don't pay their debts. The airlines on their part are saying, hey, listen, this is a really tough period of time that we're going through, and essentially you need to give us some more time in terms of remitting. Now, how this works, a healthy portion of the tickets that you purchase when you book a flight, a healthy portion of those tickets are fees. And they get the fees. They're supposed to now remit them to these Civil Aviation Authority, Airspace Management Agency, the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria. So, but then it's just a really, really, really tough time because their margins are being eaten up by their maintenance costs, FX issues, and so on and so forth. Speaking of FX issues, I don't know if anyone's noticed, the naira has now fallen to about 695 to the dollar on the parallel market. Last time it hit about 700 was back in July 27th or 28th. Lots of pressure at that time. It fell down to about the 600 levels, but now it's climbing back up again. This is the end of August. Schools are starting up in September. So there's demand, of course, to pay school fees. You've got, people that are still traveling, holiday makers and so on and so forth. So if you think about the amount of, I think looking at the balance of payments data from the central bank, we spent about $1.5 to $2 billion on flights in terms of, as far as the balance of payments is concerned, what was paid out. So while you've got, a 41 item banned list for goods, you still have an open window for FX for services. So, I guess there's still something to be said as to whether or not this is sufficient or can be maintained going forward. Mele Kyari, head of the NNPC Limited, is saying that he's saying that we will no longer import fuel by mid-2023. And he says this as a result of the Dangote refinery and our own refineries' combined capacity. Let's listen to what he said.
This refinery, if it does come up, and it will come up because we are on the board of that company now, we know what is happening now, that it will come on stream by the mid of next year. Projection is first quarter, but we think that it can come up latest by the end of mid of next year. If it does, this refinery alone, because it has 650,000 per barrel capacity and a different technology, which means that it can crack the crude in a manner that you can have more gasoline than a typical refinery. That means that that refinery has ability to produce up to 50 million liters of PMS. So the combination of that and our own ability to bring back our refinery will completely eliminate any importation of petroleum product into this country next year. You will not see any importation into this country next year.
You heard it there, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it right there. By mid-2023, it's on record. The head of the NNPC Limited, which is now a commercial entity, we will not import any. And look, if that happens, you are eliminating a hefty amount of FX that goes towards importing this. I think our total, when you look at what we import, petroleum products are like 30-40%. So if that happens, now, you know, we would like to hear from the Dangote refinery and whether or not that is like the case that they will be on stream. But, you know, hey, we'll see what happens. And don't forget, NNPC has a NNPC Limited 20% stake, equity stake in the refinery. And they also say they're supplying them about crude as well. Finally, the headline in this state newspaper to channel the Mr. Emmanuel Lefini, you're seeing that Peter Obi, diaspora Nigerians are saying that they are going to target about $150 million for his campaign. Now, you remember, laudable, it kind of reminds you of Obama back in 2008 and his grassroots funding around the United States and around the world. But there is, of course, the Securities and Exchange Commission. There are the guidelines around crowdfunding and the rules in terms of transparency and also for politically exposed persons. There's also a question of whether or not they can raise that amount of money because there's a cost of living crisis going on overseas where inflation. We're going to get US job numbers on Friday. These factors are impacting the ability for diaspora Nigerians to be able to hit that target. But that notwithstanding, we will see if that is possible. And that's our Africa business update.
So a couple of questions. Number one, at what rate is the NNPC going to sell that crude where they said they'll give a right of first refusal for 500,000 BPD? If I'm correct on that number, for 20 to 21 years.
Yeah.
You know, at what rate are they going to sell it? And if it's been sold at international rate, it's not going to impact price. Secondly, when is it going to get on the road? Because, you know, we've had expectations and it keeps being pushed forward. What's the level of the turnaround maintenance?
Push backward.
Push backward, sorry. Yeah. What's the level? I mean, it depends on the way you What's the level of turnaround maintenance being done?
Yeah.
You know, as we speak, and how are we going to get the money to complete it in a year that they're saying we will not have money for capital project, or has the money been paid down already? All right. And most importantly, he has said this now. I think we will we will hold on to it and just keep it there and be looking.
No, we'll be here now.
We'll be here, God willing. Yeah. But you see, the economists, when the economists say something, they put a caveat called ceteris paribus.
All things being equal.
All things being equal. So all things being equal, fingers crossed. We want it to happen. If it's happened, I'll be very jubilant. You know, it's going to be a great sense of happiness for everybody.
Yeah.
But all things being equal, let us wait and see. But I'll like answers to those questions I just put out
before
there.
you answer, I would like to say something before we run out of time and I don't get a chance to intervene. And it's as follows. What Mr. Kyari has done is to raise hope, to build confidence, and to reassure Nigerians that by next year, importation of fuel will end. But he also made the point that even if all the refineries were working, and you add what comes from the Dangote refinery to all of that, there will still be a deficit. But the assurance, of course, is that, well, what we will import may not be of such a large, volume.
Yeah.
But the question is, which is one of the questions raised by Rufai, would this have any effect on price? Because that's the big concern of Nigerians, the pump price of fuel, not necessarily scarcity, but how much it will cost.
Right.
That's one point. The same Mr. Kyari then raised the point that, look, all the 37 depots in the country, from either Atlas Cove to Ibadan, or from Benin to Warri in every part of the country, they are not functioning.
Right.
Because either as a result of fire outbreaks or because of oil theft, even NNPC has had to abandon, those pipelines. So, which pipelines are we going to use, even when this fuel is available? Because it was quoted as even saying, even churches are involved,
and
mosques and individual homes are involved in the business of oil theft. The upstream regulatory agency tells us that about $1 billion worth of crude, has been stolen in this year alone. Or is it first quarter of this year alone? $1 billion. Now, who is going to address that? Because even if you address availability, then how do you transport it? How do you stop pipeline vandalism? How do you stop oil theft? Or there is going to be some kind of imaginary infrastructure that will deliver this fuel to Nigerians. Quickly, on the airline operators of Nigeria. Yes, the aviation sector in Nigeria is really troubled. To hear that they are owing over, is it 9 billion?
19 billion.
19 billion. Yeah. That's a lot. Parking charges, navigation charges, charges on tickets. So all of this, accumulated over the years. Now, it's not only NCAA, Civil Aviation Authority, that is complaining. The Federal Aviation Authority of Nigeria is also saying they are being owed money. The Nigeria Airspace Management Agency, NAMA, is also complaining. And all these agencies claim that they rely on internally generated revenue, not subvention from government. Which means that for their own operations, these debts constitute a hindrance. But the big takeaway for me at the meeting where all of this happened was that the vice president of the airline operators of Nigeria, Allen Onyama, called on domestic airlines to try and pay their debts for services rendered. Because if these services are rendered, then they have an obligation to pay. But the NCAA and others, they're saying they would like to work out a memorandum of understanding as to how these debts, can be offset over time. So it further compounds issues in the aviation sector, but we hope that it will be resolved.
Rotus, we didn't get time to speak about green hydrogen, but I will point in that
it's going to... green blouse.
That is true, but it is going to completely change the geopolitics of the Middle East and energy in the Middle East. I will say that, because it represents just 1% of hydrogen that we can get today. The rest is produced through fossil fuels, so that is a huge development.
I trust you to have that data, Leila.
It is quite cool. It's very exciting, I must say. But thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rotus.